Hey y'all, happy Wednesday. Welcome back to the first episode of Tech Backstage this week. Live today with Braydan Young, co-founder at Sendoso. Braydan, how you doing today?
Eddie, good to be here. Quite an intro there. The
Thanks,
music.
man.
You guys
Yeah.
didn't warn me about that one. You got some good rock music. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the trick is that I used to be an audio engineer before I became a software engineer. So I have
Uh,
I'm kind of OCD on production. So that's what Carlos and the graphics team, those guys, we all, they all put that together. So anyways, yeah, we're trying to be kind of at least
I like
medium
it.
quality. Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us, dude. I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat with me today.
Yeah, good to be here.
Yeah, excited to talk about scaling. I think definitely, important thing to talk about. A lot of people are interested to understand how to scale. Most days, I'm still trying to figure out how to scale above where we're at right now. So I think it'll be an interesting conversation, and I think you have a lot of experience in scaling. So excited to talk about that.
Absolutely.
Um, Before we do that, I'd love to just intro you a little bit to the audience, talk a little bit about who you are, your backstory, and how you came to co-found Sendoso.
Yeah. So I mean, like for those who don't know what Sendoso is, like we're a gifting platform. So anything you might want to send to a customer, to a prospect, to an employee, we do. So think like digital gifts, physical gifts, direct gifts like cupcakes. We plug into Amazon, send things from there, and then we track it. So that's our special sauce. We track to show that you sent somebody something. Did it actually help get them on the phone? Did it help get the demo? Did it help close the deal? So we call it a sending platform. So check us out. How we ended up essentially here was I started out of college in a sales role selling insurance and jumped around sales roles for a long time. Learned that insurance was not tech, so didn't make it there very long. So like jumped pretty quickly into tech when my boss was like, we do it the old fashioned way and we don't have any sort of CRM. And I'm like, I don't think this is for me.
Gotta
So
go.
jumped around sales roles for a long time. And then my co-founder and I, we met in college. We were in a bar where all good ideas come from, and we had a couple
Absolutely.
beers, and he was like, dude, I'm sending out Starbucks gift cards to people trying to get meetings. I'm just downloading them from their website, adding them to emails, and like people are getting back to me. And I was like, oh, I'll try that. So we tried it. We were both sales guys. And so we would go to starbucks.com, buy an e-gift, add it to an email, be like, hey, take my meeting. Here's $5 to Starbucks. And it worked pretty well because like that was around 7 years ago, and account-based marketing was the new big thing everyone was trying to get in front of. And we were basically doing it without realizing it. So we're like, what if we could actually like build a system that does this? So went to Odesk or Upwork, whatever they call it now, found some guys in Pakistan who we sent wireframes to what we wanted built out. And like they actually built out this first iteration of Sendoso that we called Coffee Sender that did e-gifts. And it was cool. Like we launched it like the month one, we made like 60 grand and we're like, oh man, this
Wow.
actually might be a thing. Like we were like beer money. It's going to be
Yeah.
great. And like, as we launched it, Starbucks, of course, sent us a letter right away being like, who the hell are you guys? And why is our logo all over your website? So we were like, well, we probably can't just do Starbucks. So we ended up switching the name to Sendoso, and we added more things to send out rather than just e-gift codes to Starbucks. We added like 1,000 e-gifts. We added direct sends like cupcakes and all that fun stuff you might want to send to a customer or to a prospect. And then we were very naive and decided to buy a warehouse. So we're like, we'll get a warehouse and we'll basically take everyone's swag closets and store them. And if anyone wants to send something out, they can let us know in sendoso.com. We'll send it out for them. We'll send back tracking information to their CRM. So that was sort of the start of it. And then warehousing was quite hard. And we learned quickly that that was naive, and we had to hire a lot of people to help us build the warehouse. And we did. So now we have 7. So that's gone actually 6. So like that's gone fast. Where now we have a lot of stuff in warehouses around the world. And as we're building this out, like we kind of like, do we raise money? And we were like, no, let's keep this a lifestyle business. And then we raised a little bit of money, and then a little more, a little more. And so now I think we have like 153 million in that we've raised, which has been awesome because that's helped us grow and scale. And that's kind of the story in a nutshell. Very brief version of the story.
I
That
love
makes
that.
sense.
$60,000 your first month. That's a lot of beer money. I
Right? I mean,
mean,
like the margin on coffee e-gifts are like 1% though, because you buy them for $5, we'd sell them for $5, and like they gave us a little bit of a discount, and so we're like, this is gonna be huge. We're gonna be rich. Not on
right.
5 cards. No.
Yeah. So, yeah. No. So you're selling it at 5, you buying it at 5, and
Yeah.
yeah. So nuts.
Like pre-revenue. Who cares
Yeah.
about revenue?
Yeah.
But that's
Profit.
how we began, right? And then like the crazy part was we were growing, and then COVID hit, like 3 years in. And COVID, if there was one like silver lining, it was pretty awesome for us because everyone went home. So
Yeah.
as everyone's home, it's like, how am I going to get a relationship or build a relationship with my employees, my prospects, my customers, and it's send them stuff. And that worked
Yeah.
very well because that helped, and we were able to like figure that out pretty quickly. So that was actually a pretty good thing for us if you were to find one good thing from a global pandemic.
Yeah, I was gonna say like we started like end of 2019 we kind of did the POC for the company. We're like, oh, I think this is gonna work. And so we actually registered the company January 2020. And so
Nice. Perfect timing.
yes, yeah, like just if I would have known what was coming. But I mean, kind of the same, boat that you were in is it actually and I don't want to put a positive spin on a global pandemic, obviously, but I think it definitely went a different direction than we expected it to. And one of the things that I love, especially about working in tech, is the amount of innovation that comes out of facing a problem like a global pandemic, and just all of the different ways that people learn to innovate around it and innovate for it. You know what I mean? You're talking about how you guys are quickly realizing, oh, hey, we can actually use this for companies, or people are building applications to do COVID test tracking at airports, or for us, it was great because almost right out of the gate, you're sitting there going, well, do I need to, rent an office and, put all these, chairs and computers in there? And it made it really easy for us to go, oh no, we'll just be 100% remote. And so scale, startup costs were minimal for us, but it's interesting to see, just how everybody like really adapted to the pandemic when it first hit.
Yeah, I mean, we were working on a feature before the pandemic happened that was like an address confirmation. So if I send you something, Eddie, you get an email being like, "Hey, where are you in the world?" And you can put in your address, and we could like redirect that package that someone sent. And it was this we were building it basically because we had a hard time getting packages to like C-level execs, because like they were all over the place and they were
Right.
never in the corporate office. But like when the pandemic hit, we rolled it out as like, hey, confirm address. Everyone was at home and no one knew, and no one had home addresses. And we put a good marketing spin on it, and like we were like first on like the address confirmation things, as we got lucky because this made sense for the pandemic, which was
Right.
interesting.
No, I love that. That's great, dude. That's another really good example of innovating in the face of the pandemic, but
There you
also
go.
riding the front of the wave, like being right at the front of the wave and not even knowing you're there, right? Yeah, I
Yeah,
love that.
exactly.
Cool, dude. Well, let's dive in. I want to talk a lot about, because you guys have had some pretty phenomenal growth in the last 7 years. I love that you were telling me you were talking to Carlos, our podcast producer, what, 7 years ago. It is
Yeah.
you and one other dude.
Yep. Two of us.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't. Are we allowed to talk about how many people work for Sendoso
Yeah.
now?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
like, it's a good number.
Yeah. So
600
you,
ish.
yeah, 2 to 607 years. That's probably the definition of scaling, if I've
Yeah.
if I've ever seen it or heard of it before.
It's a lot of, yeah, it's a lot of good folks. But like, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, that happened quickly. I don't know how we got there that fast.
Yeah, so let's dive in and talk about that a little bit. I guess first and foremost, what's that feel like? Like, what does it feel like?
Yeah, so I think we're probably a good example of because I know you're on the engineering side, and so my background is sales, my co-founder's background is sales. So when we started building the product, we started selling before there was a product. And like our first like 10 hires, like most of the, like half of them were sales. And so because like we had a working product, like we had a bunch of contractors helping us in Pakistan and the US, and like, but like our goal was to push a product as fast as possible that maybe wasn't super working. Is the best way to put it. Like
Right.
and to get feedback from customers as we built it. Because most early customers, if they're willing to talk to you and adopt your product 'cause you're trying to solve some problem they might have, they're usually probably also willing to give you a lot of feedback. And
Yeah.
so our approach was, hey, our first customers are our advocates. We're building this for them. So like we usually pitch that way. And like our first couple folks being sales was very helpful because we could scan the market really quickly and get a lot of those guys and get a lot of feedback really fast that we then gave to product engineering to help build. So we were cranking stuff out every week because we had so much stuff to build. And Pakistan was helpful because we could build at night and then push the next morning. So we had like a really revolving clock, like probably the first couple years, which was awesome.
Yeah, no, I love that, and it's always interesting to see how different organizations scale because I don't think there's one right way to do it. Right? You're talking about hiring a lot of salespeople out of the gate. We kind of went the opposite route and hired a bunch of engineering people out of the gate, and now we're catching up on the sales side. But I don't think there's necessarily one right way to do it. I always tell people I don't believe in right and wrong. I believe in like things that are working and not working,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of it's nothing's ever black and white, and there's a lot of different shades of gray in between there, but I think there's one kind of underlying theme there, which is that successful companies have great people, right?
Yeah, and I think not just great people, but also hacky folks is probably the best way to
Right.
put it. And so I mean, like I think like especially in a startup, like our sales folks understood the product backwards and forwards. Like at that stage, there's no like, oh, like let me bring my sales engineer who's also on the phone that didn't exist who could like demo how this product integrates. Like that's non-existent. So you're running
Right.
the whole demo yourself. If the platform crashes halfway through, you figure it out. You're like, oh, like
Yeah.
they must be pushing an update, and so you get really good at doing demos. But like no matter what the person is and their role is, like they have to be the self-starter. I mean, all the terms we know, the self-starter, the hackiness, it's usually for sales. It's someone who's been an entry-level salesperson and they're just about to jump to an AE. And like they've been at only small companies as well as what we had success with, not the bigger company to the smaller company.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree with you too, because you start looking at corporations, and nothing against corporations if any of you guys are listening in,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
please, just all of a sudden my screen goes black. No, but like I agree. Like corporations, there's processes in place. They're typically thinking, quarters, halves, or years in front of where they're currently at because it takes so long to get those things in motion. Whereas coming from a startup, even if there are processes in place, they're typically very, very flexible or not completely rigid. And like you said, there's these situations where, and like you said, being on the engineering side, I always look at it coming from there are people who can solve problems, right? Like you said, hacky. I love that term because they're people that are not afraid to roll up their sleeves. They're not afraid to get dirty. They're not afraid to jump into an area that they don't know. I love the crashing demo. Like if you can
Yeah.
get through an app crashing on you during a sales call and still close the customer, like I mean, you're basically sales royalty in my book, right? So
you just play it off as like, oh man, it's weird. But I mean, like
yeah,
I think that there's all kinds of tricks that you learn there. I mean, like because so many folks you don't have when you're growing, when you're scaling, you kind of just get at doing like wearing multiple hats. And like no matter what the role is on engineering or sales or product, like I think that's an important thing to remember.
yeah. And so interested to hear a little bit too about, as you're scaling, as you're growing a team, you start out very um everybody's wearing multiple hats, and everybody's got to contribute to, the underlying mission and vision. And interested to kind of hear how going from 2 to 600 people, how do you keep that same vision, and that same kind of hackiness and scrappiness with the people, and even as you're maybe formalizing a little bit more the departments and the roles that people play. And I don't know if you guys have like org charts, or if it's more like a flat or a round org chart, but would love to hear a little bit about how you guys can kind of maintain that as you're scaling.
Yeah. So I mean, like I am I'm very anti-process. I hate process. Like I think that like but I think also think it's important, especially as we've gotten bigger. So something that we did early on was like hackiness and being the self-starter was like core to our success early on and still is. And as we grew, we knew we needed certain leaders and departments. You have to have someone run marketing, you have to have someone run product and engineering. And there has to be process there and project managers who help navigate projects across big orgs. But and it's almost like a well rehearsed chaos is probably like
Yeah.
if you have a big project with like multiple stakeholders. We messed up a ton where like we've like the pendulum swings, or sometimes you have too much process and like you have too much red tape to get things done. Think big companies think like, oh, we can't possibly move pricing, or we can't build that feature because it touches these other 14 things. Like you end up there sometimes and you swing back, and then you have like 10,000 ideas and no one knows what they're working on, and it's kind of all over the place. And so like right in the middle is like where you want to live. And the way we've had success there is probably after the first couple of years, we started rolling out OKRs. Like, hey, like here's our initiative and goals that we want to get to as a company. Here's our targets we want to get to as a company. And we align as a company around this is our top line revenue. These are our innovations we need to hit. These are our features we need to push. And that's kind of what we have done for the last couple of years. It's worked well sometimes. Sometimes you have folks who are very good at early stage companies who don't go along the journey with you once you start adding process like that, which is okay. But you want to have those people do things that we call basically tiger teams. Like you have like all the innovative teams, like the ones that are coming up with new unique things. Like you want to maintain those people as much as possible and give them runway to go experiment. So like
Yeah.
it's important to have experimentation like teams as
Yeah.
well.
There was one thing that you said that I love, which is like you're anti-process. And I remember when we first started, I was the same way. And our COO was like, we have to have processes and a handbook. And I was like, we should have like guidelines, but I
Yeah.
don't think but
Yeah.
but I was like, I was really like, I don't want to have formal processes in place because I was afraid that it would make it too rigid for a startup. But I 100% agree with you. As we've grown, we've definitely seen the need to, formalize a lot of things, especially when it comes to like things like onboarding, making sure that, somebody has kind of, we call them code buddies for the engineers, but some sort of sponsor to onboard the person through the process. But, that's one example. But I agree with you. I've kind of come around to the fact that, like, look, in order for you to have a scalable, repeatable organization, talking about anything, sales or marketing, it's got to be something that can be repeatable, right? And
Yeah.
it's really hard to be repeatable if you don't at least have a general framework for how it's supposed to go together and how it's supposed to function. Like you said, like what are the outcomes that you're looking for? Um, yeah,
Yeah, it takes a long time to get there too. And there's a lot of people who it just depends on like the folks you have on each team, and some teams are going to go a lot faster than others, which is
yeah.
important to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I love the OKRs too. That's something that we started implementing recently, and I think we're still starting to get our feet, or we're still working on getting our feet underneath us with the OKRs. But I love, and this kind of goes back to something that I read in a book called Working Backwards. It's on the Amazon process, but kind of like starting with the end in mind, right? Like when you're looking at your OKRs, that's kind of the way that I've been approaching it. Like you're talking about, well, what do we want our top line revenue to look like next year, right? Because how do you set sales targets if you don't know what your target top line revenue is? But if you know what your target top line revenue is, it's really easy to work backwards and go, okay, well, average contract value is, X amount of dollars. And so we need Y amount of clients, new clients, in order for us to get to this new top line revenue target. So it's a lot easier to work backwards from there, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I think you also have like we something that we've done to like maintain the culture as we've grown as well is, and it changed halfway through because we all went home, but like that's when we did most of
right.
our scaling. But like there was we consistently have an all hands every 2 weeks. We consistently cover like what different teams are working on. Uh Slack, even though it's chaotic, is everyone's best friend because you can see what every team is working on, and you can pull up different OKRs to try to make it not siloed. We tried an intranet that didn't work, but it's more like lots and lots of sharing in all teams
Yeah.
channels or like what teams are working on, and like trying to open those up to try to create dialogue is like how we've kind of maintained it with everyone being home and not in the office.
Yeah.
And that's sort of works. I mean, it's a moving target as to how folks want to absorb content internally, I would say.
Yeah. Well, and that's a really great point too, because like you said, Slack it's chaotic because it's we use it like our digital headquarters. So
Yep.
it's just like a bunch of people standing in a room yelling at each other constantly, and then as soon as you share a file, like 3 seconds later, it's lost because there's 400 messages behind that
Yeah.
file.
And no one knows how to use threads and it's all over the
Yeah.
place. And yeah, I know that
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that brings up a really good point, especially around remote teams. And we're talking about having great people to help organizations scale, but in order to keep people happy and in order to keep people engaged, you have to have solid culture, right? Besides Slack being what it is, like what are some of the other things that you guys have done on the culture side to make people feel like this is someplace that they want to be long term and keep them engaged, especially remote culture. Like that's a really hard one that I think a lot of us are still trying to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, like, so we have our offices still that we'll have like big meetings in. Like, it's like, hey, like, you want to fly into San Francisco or Scottsdale? Folks will fly in for like those meetings. But like, it's a lot of remote style teams. We'll hold a lot of events. I think all that is kind of table stakes at this point. So I think a lot of people, what they want to know is just what am I working towards? And so it almost connects back to like the previous conversation. Is like, hey, like, what are the OKRs? Where do we end up? Who are we competing against? What does it look like next year, 2 year, 3 years, like down the line for Sendoso? And so being very transparent with that, and we've got a lot of feedback that we need to be even more transparent. That helps, I think, folks build the culture and build trust because they kind of know where the ship's being navigated, and that in turn can help with things like we do. The simple things like we don't want you burning out, so we give you a vacation bonus to take a vacation. We send out being a gifting platform, we can send out a ton of stuff for like little
Right.
gift type stuff. Like that makes it easy. But like those are kind of small culture things. Like the big thing is to make sure we get together at least once a year and to make sure that we have a lot of communication and we're transparent around things. This helps kind of build the trust and culture here.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's incredible that you actually pay people a bonus to get them to use their vacation time
Thousand
nowadays. That's
bucks. We tell them to go. Like they have to post a picture of them on vacation. That's the
yeah,
only criteria. And like, there's this. What the goal behind it was, my co-founder and I never really wanted to get burnt out because we saw so many founders do that, and so we're like, I remember the first time he went on vacation, or maybe it was me. Like one of us we were sending each other like beer money, like for the airport. Like, hey, like, have a drink on me at the airport, and we were like, this should be a thing we do for employees. And so we
yeah.
added it, and it became $1,000 because I don't know why not. Like a really nice meal and a night at the hotel or something
Yeah.
was the thought behind it.
No, I love that. I think that's great. And I think, like you said, I think I mean, not that you should need motivation to go on vacation, but I mean, I think like it's nice for the company to do that too, right?
Yeah.
Um, so with all of that being said, I'd love to kind of like shift, talking about people and culture. Um, especially, we talked earlier about the pandemic, the current economy, and how that's going to affect companies scaling. I think one of the things that there's a lot of concern around right now, and something that we've even seen, especially with early stage startups, is that the VC dollars are shifting. They're not. I don't think they're going away. At least in my experience, I think they're shifting more towards companies who have found product market fit, who have a solid go to market strategy, and are really more in a position to start scaling as opposed to throwing money. Or I don't want to say throwing money, but investing money in earlier stage ideas to see if they might be kind of the next big thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, like for us, it's gone from like growth at all cost to profitability. And so like
Yep.
I would say that if you're a co-founder listening, get really good at learning how to read like a P&L and a spreadsheet. I think that like even though that's so anti to a lot of folks sometimes, like that I've had to get good at reading that as like, hey, like where, and like knowing your numbers, like where is the sales team going to end up? What does churn look like? Like knowing all those things is so important to keeping the company afloat and knowing if you can actually hire or not. And it's a tough thing sometimes to kind of keep all those numbers in your mind, but I think that's the important thing, is to know all of it. I mean, like, as most startups look and see like what their runway is, like runway is the most important right now, and to try to extend it as much as you possibly can. So those are good exercises to have. Those are hard exercises to have,
Yeah.
but they're necessary to make sure that the company lasts through probably a next year of pretty turbulent times. The VC world is not where you can go right now and ask for any sort of money, unless, like, maybe if you're a seed stage company and you're just trying to figure out if your idea works, like maybe it's business as usual. But if you've raised money and you raised at a crazy valuation in the past, then you need to spend more time in cost cutting measures and more time in, like, hey, like, how can we extend our runway year, 2 years to try to make the company profitable?
Yeah, I think that's a really, like, important thing to do right now. Um, I don't know, and, I'm trying not to ask you a gotcha question here, but, and feel free to just tell me to kick rocks if this is way out of line. But, like, for example, like, we saw what happened with Shopify and Coinbase and a lot of other companies, right? And I think even or I think it was the CEO of Shopify who had even admitted that, part of the reason why they had so many layoffs was because they saw the trend in the pandemic and they thought that, that would lead to e-commerce numbers being a couple years ahead of, like, they're like, we're going to get to that place eventually, but they were really predicting it more to be a few years down the road. And the way that they read into it was that the pandemic actually shifted that forward a couple years, and so that's why they ended up, kind of over hiring, I think, unintentionally. But what do you think from a scalability perspective? I mean, I feel like it's important to make sure that you're not over hiring, but how do you, going back to some of the stuff that you're talking about, how do you, kind of quantify that to make sure that, you know, not only are you able to extend your runway, but that you're doing things in a healthy, sustainable way as you scale?
Yeah. So I mean, like, we overhired as well. I think that, like, that's one of those things where I mean, if you look at this year, like the beginning of this year, it was very different than where we are right now. And it happened really quickly. And so it was in January, growth at all costs and higher into your pipeline that you're building. And, you're going to keep growing. Then all of a sudden it became a switch to profitability. And so that's one of those things that it's what we should have done is, like, it's good to have lots of exercises around, like, hey, like, where are we going? What does the economy look like? And companies just need to do that more, as to, like,
Yeah.
hey, like, where are we going to end up? Like, what are the early warning signs that we're seeing? And I think that a lot of us, if you pay attention to the news, you're like, I don't know, is it really happening? Or maybe they're just trying to get more. So, like, it's tough to stay on top of all of that. But my advice is, keep an eye on the market and keep an eye, like, your VCs do this all day long. And so, like, listen to those folks too, as to, like, what they're seeing, because
Yeah.
once that kind of dries up, it's easy to be like, okay, that's probably coming down the road to us.
Yeah. Well, and I think it kind of sucks too to have this conversation, but, especially, we're talking about this from a business perspective, right? And you're talking about shifting from growth at all costs to profitability and extending your runway. Like, as a business owner, if you're the founder of a startup, like, sometimes those are conversations that you have to have, right? And they're uncomfortable conversations, but, I'll kind of put my hand up, and maybe give the unpopular opinion in the room. But, sometimes if you have to be in those situations, just like with what the CEO of Shopify was saying, is like, they're not laying people off on purpose because they want to. It's just, you're in that situation as a business owner, and sometimes you have to make those tough calls that, like, hey, we put ourselves in this situation, and, we did everything we could with the information that we had available, but in order to continue to scale, we need to scale back and drive profitability and put some money in the bank, right? But and those conversations suck to have, and sometimes there's people on the receiving end of those decisions. But um I don't know,
Yeah,
like, what's your
I
opinion?
I agree. I mean, like, I think it, like, when you like, no matter where you go in your career, I think there's going to have those conversations are going to happen, and it's kind of the roller coaster, right? I think that it's
Yep.
just important to keep in mind that you got to be a human in it. So, like,
Yep.
if you do, I'm not a fan of, like, the massive layoffs on a Zoom call with, like,
Yeah.
100 people, or, like, the emails being like, oh, you don't work here anymore. I think, like, it's good to be a human.
Yeah.
And if you do have to let somebody go because you overhired, or because, like, the economy went down, then like it should be your job as a founder to help those folks find new jobs or to
Yeah.
like point them in the right direction. Because I think
Yep.
that like the world of tech is very small. And if I don't
Yep.
think if you've realized that yet, like then you're probably in the wrong spot. Like I think that like I've worked with some people like now at 2 or 3 different tech startups, and like I think that this happens. You find your crew that you like to work with, and like you're going to sell to those people again at some point. And so
Yep.
just to make sure to be human is probably the most important part.
Yeah, I love that too. And I agree. I think it's all about being human. And, I
Yep.
think, I've certainly made mistakes, and I try to go and, anytime I do, I try to let everybody know that I'm aware that I made the mistake and put my hand up and just, take responsibility for it and try to move on. And
Yeah.
I think we try to be more about solutions as opposed to the problems. Right. But anyways, that's kind of my 2 cents on it. So,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I was gonna say, so I think we're over time. Do you have any closing remarks or
No,
any
hey,
advice?
I mean, like, I'd love to come back. This was awesome. And like,
Yeah.
one, like, quality of this, like, it's cool that like my picture gets bigger. It's sweet. So, like,
Yeah,
I mean,
dude.
I once we're through all these crazy times, I'd love to come back and continue to talk about how we all navigated another year of craziness. I mean, it's already been a wild one. So we'll see what 2023 has in store.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Brayden, thanks so much for being with us. I know you got to run out. I know you're short on time, so I appreciate you being here on the show. Carlos, let's just cut to. I think we're wrapped for this week. We kind of screwed up
Awesome.
with the time zones, so
No worries.
yeah. So, anyways, Brayden, appreciate you being on the show, and
Thanks, Eddie.
yeah, we'll see you soon.
Talk soon.
Bye.